Hey, I'm really glad you're here. Take a moment to get comfortable wherever you are. Let your shoulders relax and let the day gently fall away. You don't need to do anything right now. Just listen and let the story unfold at its own pace. Whenever you're ready, we'll begin.
The Book of 11, Story of a Wizard Girl, the girl who heard the wind speak. In a small town wrapped in pine forests and silver lakes, there lived a girl named Alara Wren. Her house sat at the edge of town, where the trees began whispering secrets to the mountains. It was an old wooden house with creaking floors and soft amber lights that glowed warmly through lace curtains. Every evening, when the sun slipped behind the hills, the wind would hum a tune just outside her window, and Alara could hear it, not just the sound, the meaning. The wind spoke in soft riddles about distant valleys, forgotten doors, and something waiting. Alara was 11 years old when the whispers grew louder. On the night of her 11th birthday, as moonlight pooled across her bedroom floor, she heard 3 clear words carried by the wind: "Find the book." She sat up slowly, heart calm but curious. She had always known she was a little different. While other children dreamed of roller coasters and summer fairs, Alara dreamed of floating lanterns, ancient libraries, and glowing symbols dancing in the dark. That night, the wind felt closer than ever. Then somewhere inside her, something old and quiet began to wake. The hidden library beneath the floorboards. It happened on a rainy afternoon. Alara was tidying her room when one of the wooden floorboards shifted under her bare foot. Not loudly, just enough to make her pause. The air changed. It felt expectant. She knelt down and pressed against the board. It lifted. Beneath it was a narrow spiral staircase carved from pale stone, glowing faintly as if lit by fireflies. She didn't feel afraid. She felt expected. Step by careful step, she descended into a hidden chamber, a circular library stretching wider than her house above. Shelves curved along stone walls, filled with books bound in leather, silk, bark, and materials she didn't recognize. In the center stood a single pedestal, and on it rested a book wrapped in midnight blue cloth. Embossed on its cover in silver letters were the words, "The Book of 11." When she touched it, warmth spread through her fingertips. The wind sighed in approval. The first spell of light. The Book of 11 did not open like ordinary books. It unfolded. Pages shimmered into view like reflections on water. The ink glowed faintly, shifting and settling as if alive. The first page held only one sentence: "Magic begins where fear ends." Alara whispered the words aloud. The room responded. A small orb of golden light bloomed in her palm, soft as candlelight, warm as sunlight through autumn leaves. It didn't burn. It hummed gently, as if pleased to exist. She laughed quietly, the sound echoing softly in the chamber. The book revealed that 11 was not just her age. It was a threshold. 11 gates of knowing, 11 lessons of balance, 11 spells to awaken what sleeps inside. Each night, after her parents fell asleep upstairs, Alara returned to the hidden library. She learned to call light from shadows, to listen to the language of stones, and to calm storms with a steady breath. Her magic was not loud or wild. It was gentle, like her, the shadow between the trees. But every story, even soft ones, holds a whisper of darkness. One evening, while practicing near the forest's edge, Alara felt the wind falter. The pine trees no longer whispered kindly. Their branches stiffened. Between the trunks stood a shape made not of shadow, but of absence, like a place where light forgot how to exist. It did not roar. It did not chase. It simply watched. The Book of 11 had warned her. Where there is awakening, there is remembering. The shadow was not an enemy. It was something forgotten. Alara felt fear rise like cold water, but she remembered the first lesson. Magic begins where fear ends. She closed her eyes, held out her trembling hand, and summoned the small golden light she had practiced each night. It flickered at first uncertain, then grew steady. She did not cast it like a weapon, she offered it. The light drifted gently toward the darkness, and where they met, something remarkable happened. The shadow softened, not erased, not destroyed, understood. The forest exhaled, the 11th gate. On the final page of the book, after many quiet nights of study, Alara found the last lesson. It was not a spell. It was a choice. The Book of 11 was never meant to stay hidden. Magic was not meant to live underground. It was meant to live in kindness, in courage, in listening, in ordinary days. The 11th gate was stepping forward. And so, on a calm morning painted in soft gold, Alara closed the hidden library and sealed the staircase beneath her floor. The book remained, but no longer as a secret. It now lived inside her. The wind still spoke, but now she understood something new. It spoke to everyone. Most people had simply forgotten how to listen. Zilara Wren, wizard girl of 11 gates, walked into the world not to rule it, not to conquer darkness, but to keep a small, steady light alive. And on quiet nights, if you listen carefully as you drift towards sleep, you might hear the wind hum a gentle tune. It may be calling your name, the clock that ticked backward. A week after the shadow in the forest softened into silence, Alara began noticing something unusual in her hidden library. There was a clock on the far wall she had never truly seen before. It was tall and carved from pale oak, its face etched with symbols instead of numbers. And one quiet evening, as candlelight flickered against stone, she realized it was ticking backward. Tick-a-tock-a-tick, but in reverse. Alara stepped closer, her slippers whispering against the floor. The Book of 11 shimmered faintly in her hands, as if aware of her curiosity. On the next page, new words appeared. Time is not a river, it is a garden. She tilted her head, and suddenly she understood. Some moments are meant to be revisited. Not to change them, but to understand them more deeply. The clock chimed 11 soft notes. The air shimmered, and Alara found herself standing in a memory, her 6th birthday, when she had first tried to tell her parents about the wind's voice. She remembered how they smiled kindly but didn't understand. This time, she didn't feel small. She felt patient. The memory folded gently around her like a blanket, and when she returned to the library, she carried something new, compassion for her younger self. The clock continued ticking backward, but now it felt less mysterious, more like a guardian of gentle reflection. The tea shop that appeared only at dusk. In the heart of town, between a bakery and an old record store, something unusual appeared one evening at exactly 6:11 p.m. The tea shop. It had not been there that morning. Its windows glowed amber. Wind chimes made of silver spoons sang softly above the door. A sign read, 11 leaves. Alara felt the pull immediately. Inside, the air smelled of cinnamon and rain. Shelves held glass jars filled with herbs that shimmered faintly. Behind the counter stood a woman with silver hair braided down her back. She looked at Alara and smiled knowingly. "You've opened the book," the woman said, pouring tea without being asked. Alara nodded. The woman introduced herself as Myra, a keeper of warmth. Not a wizard in the way Alara was, but someone who guarded comfort in the world. She explained that magic was not only light and shadows. It was also a cup of tea shared, a door held open. It was a story told softly at bedtime. Before Alara left, Myra handed her a small tin labeled Quiet Courage. "Brew this," she said, "when doubt grows louder than your heart." When Alara stepped back onto the street, the shop was gone, but the tin remained warm in her pocket. It was the river that refused to flow. Beyond the forest ran a narrow river that usually hummed happily over smooth stones. One morning it was still, completely still. No ripples, no sound. Alara knelt by the bank and pressed her fingers to the water. It felt heavy, like sadness left too long unattended. The Book of 11 opened on its own. Even rivers forget how to move. She realized then, the river was not blocked by debris, it was holding something. Listening closely, she heard faint echoes beneath the surface, forgotten wishes from townsfolk. Wishes whispered but never believed in. Dreams abandoned too soon. They had settled like pebbles at the bottom. Alara closed her eyes and summoned not a bright light this time, but a steady hum. It was a vibration of remembering. One by one, tiny sparks rose from the water like fireflies and drifted skyward. The river shivered, then flowed, softly at first, then freely. The town would never know exactly what changed that day. But people found themselves dusting off old guitars, reopening sketchbooks, calling old friends. Sometimes magic does not dazzle. Sometimes it simply releases what was stuck. The door with no handle. Deep in the hidden library, behind shelves she had never moved, Alara found a door carved from moonstone. It had no handle, no keyhole, just 11 small indentations shaped like stars. The Book of 11 turned silent when she approached it. This was something different. She pressed her finger to one indentation. Nothing. Then she remembered Myra's tea. She remembered the river, the clock. The shadow she had offered light to, each lesson had left something inside her. Slowly, she placed her palm over the door and whispered 11 truths she had learned. I am not alone. Fear is not my enemy. Kindness is strength. Listening is power. Light can be gentle, and so on until 11 filled the air. The stars glowed softly. The door opened. Inside was not treasure, not ancient spells, just a mirror. But when she looked into it, she did not see only herself. She saw every version of herself she had ever been, and every version she might become. The door closed quietly behind her. It did not need to open again. The night, the stars leaned closer. On the 11th full moon since her birthday, Alara climbed the hill behind her house. The sky stretched wide and velvet dark above her. She held the Book of 11 against her chest, and for the first time she felt the stars leaning closer, not physically, but attentively. As if listening, she understood then, the book was not about becoming powerful. It was about becoming present. 11 was not the end. It was the beginning of awareness. The wind curled around her gently, and somewhere far above, a star flickered brighter than the rest. Alara whispered, I'm ready. Not for grand adventures, not for battles, but for the quiet, lifelong work of tending light. The Book of 11 dissolved into soft silver dust, drifting into her skin like stardust returning home. She no longer needed pages. She had become the story. And as you rest tonight, if your thoughts feel heavy or the day felt long, remember, there may be a hidden staircase beneath your own quiet moments. There may be a gentle light waiting in your palm. And somewhere, a wizard girl once 11 years old is still tending the balance between shadow and glow. Sleep now. The stars are keeping watch. The house that remembered long after the Book of 11 dissolved into silver stardust and became part of Alara's breath and heartbeat. Life in the small pine-wrapped town continued in gentle, ordinary ways. Morning buses sighed along the roads. Shop doors chimed softly. The river flowed as it should. People laughed in kitchens, dogs barked at nothing in particular, and yet something subtle had changed, not loudly, not in ways that could be measured, but in ways that could be felt. Alara felt it most clearly inside her own home. The old wooden house at the edge of the forest had always creaked and sighed, as houses do. It had always held warmth in winter and cool quiet in summer, but now it seemed attentive, as if it were listening or remembering. It began one evening in late autumn. The air outside carried that crisp scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. Alara sat cross-legged on her bedroom floor, a notebook open before her. She no longer needed the hidden staircase or the glowing library beneath the boards. The staircase had sealed. The stone chamber rested quietly in whatever dimension it belonged to, but magic did not leave with it. It had changed address. It lived now in small things, in breath, in pause, in noticing. She was sketching something she had seen in a dream, a pattern of interlocking stars forming a doorway, when the floor beneath her warmed slightly. Not hot, just warm. She pressed her palm to the wood. The warmth pulsed once, faint and steady like a heartbeat. Alara smiled softly. "You remember, don't you?" she whispered. The house answered with a gentle creak in the walls, like an old friend shifting comfortably in their chair. That night, as wind curled around the eaves, Alara dreamed of rooms she had never seen, rooms inside her house. Rooms that did not exist in any physical way, and yet felt as real as her own bedroom. In the dream, she stood at the base of a long hallway lit by soft golden lanterns. The air felt thick with quiet memory. Doors lined both sides, each one painted a different shade. Soft green, dusty rose, midnight blue, pale ivory. At the end of the hallway stood a final door, unpainted, unfinished wood. She felt drawn toward it, but just before she reached it, she woke. Morning light spilled across her pillow. For a moment, she simply lay still. Then she noticed something. Her bedroom door, the real one, stood slightly ajar. She always closed it before sleeping. Always. Alara rose slowly and walked into the hallway of her house. It looked the same. Framed family photographs. The faint scent of coffee drifting from the kitchen. Sunlight catching dust motes in the air. Ordinary. And yet, the air felt layered, as if another version of the hallway existed just beneath this one. She walked to the far end where a simple linen closet stood. Yan paused. The closet door was unfinished wood, unpainted. Her breath slowed. She reached for the handle. For a moment, she hesitated, not from fear, but from awareness. The book had taught her that doors open not because they are forced, but because they are understood. She rested her forehead gently against the wood. "I'm listening," she whispered. The warmth returned stronger now, and the handle turned easily in her hand. Inside the closet were the usual shelves, towels, blankets, a faint scent of lavender soap. But behind the back wall, there was space. Not empty space, deep space. The wall seemed thinner than it should have been, as if made of mist disguised as plaster. Alara reached out and pressed her hand flat against it. The surface rippled like water touched by wind, and without resistance, her hand passed through. The house inhaled. Then exhaled, and Alara stepped forward. She stood once again in the hallway from her dream. Lanterns glowed warmly overhead. The air hummed with gentle stillness. This was not the hidden stone library from before. This felt different, closer, more intimate. She sensed immediately what this place was. The house was not hiding ancient magic. It was holding memory. Every house does, but few remember how to open that door. Alara walked slowly along the hallway, brushing her fingers lightly against each painted door. As she touched them, faint images shimmered in the air, like reflections in glass. At the pale green door, she saw a little girl sitting on the same bedroom floor years ago, building towers from books. She recognized herself at age 5, serious and quiet, already listening to something no one else heard. At the dusty rose door, she saw her mother as a child, running barefoot through a different house in a different town, laughing with wind-tangled hair. At the midnight blue door, she saw her father at 17, sitting alone beneath stadium lights after a game, staring at the sky with a look of uncertain hope. Ilera paused. The house did not belong only to her. It remembered everyone who had lived inside its walls. Their quiet fears, their small triumphs, their unspoken wishes. Houses, she realized, are vessels of invisible stories, and sometimes those stories grow heavy. She continued walking. The doors grew darker in shade as she moved farther down the hallway, deeper. The air cooled slightly. At one charcoal-colored door, she felt a weight not threatening but dense. She placed her palm against it. The lanterns flickered softly. The door opened. Inside, the room was dim, not dark, just subdued. In the center stood a simple wooden chair. And sitting in it was a version of herself she did not immediately recognize. Older, perhaps 13, perhaps 14. Her shoulders slumped slightly. Her gaze was turned inward. There was no dramatic sadness in her expression, only something quieter, distance. Ilera stepped closer. The older version looked up. "You're early," she said softly. Her voice was familiar but heavier. Ilera understood. This was not a ghost, not a prophecy. This was a possibility, a version of herself shaped by certain choices, certain forgettings. "What happened?" Ilera asked gently. The older girl shrugged. "I stopped listening." To what? To the wind, to the pauses, to the small warmth inside things. Her voice did not tremble, it simply stated, "I thought growing up meant being practical, being reasonable. I told myself magic was childish." The words did not accuse, they echoed. Ilera felt something tender unfold inside her chest. Growing older was not the enemy. Forgetting was. She knelt in front of the chair. "Does it have to be that way?" she asked. The older girl's eyes flickered. "Not if you remember." The room began to dissolve around them. Not collapsing, softening. Ilera reached forward and placed her hand over the older version's heart. A faint golden warmth spread outward, not bright, not dazzling, steady. The older girl inhaled sharply, as if taking her first full breath in a long time. The walls brightened slightly. As the heaviness lifted, when Ilera blinked, she stood alone in the hallway once more. The charcoal door now painted a gentle gray, lighter. She exhaled slowly. Magic was not about conquering darkness. It was about tending memory. She walked farther down the corridor. The final door, unfinished wood, waited. She knew instinctively that this one did not hold a memory of the past, nor a possibility of the future. It held something else. She touched the surface. The warmth this time came not from beneath her palm, but from within her chest. The door opened without sound. Inside was not a room. It was a window. A vast, open window looking out over the entire town. But the town appeared layered, as if she could see multiple versions of it at once. Children riding bikes, elderly neighbors watering gardens, a woman crying quietly in her parked car, a teenager staring at their phone beneath a street lamp, a baker kneading dough before sunrise. A man sitting alone at his kitchen table, unsure how to begin again. Each life pulsed faintly with its own invisible magic, most of them unaware. The house had not brought her here to observe, it had brought her here to understand. Her magic did not belong only in forests or secret libraries. It belonged in kitchens, on sidewalks, in moments when someone nearly gives up. She felt the weight of that truth settle gently on her shoulders, not heavy, but real. Behind her, she heard soft footsteps. She turned. Standing in the doorway was someone she had not expected. Myra, the silver-haired keeper of warmth. She looked the same as she had in the tea shop that appeared only at dusk, calm, observant, quietly amused. "You've entered the remembering rooms," Myra said. Alara nodded. "I didn't know houses could do this." "They don't," Myra replied, "not on their own." Ilara frowned slightly. Myra stepped closer, resting a hand lightly on her shoulder. "You are not just a keeper of light, Ilara. You are a keeper of thresholds. When you learned the 11 lessons, you awakened something in the spaces around you. Spaces respond to awareness." Ilara looked back at the layered town through the window. "It feels like too much," she admitted softly. Myra's smile deepened. "It would be if you thought you had to fix it." The word fix echoed strangely. "You are not here to fix the world," Myra continued. "You are here to remain awake within it." The lanterns in the hallway behind them glowed warmer. "Awake?" Ilara asked. "To the quiet moments when someone almost forgets their own light." Myra stepped back. "You cannot hold every sorrow, but you can steady your own warmth so that when someone brushes against it, they remember theirs." Ilara thought of the river that had forgotten how to flow, of the shadow that had softened when offered light, of the older version of herself who had nearly stopped listening. Magic was not spectacle, it was maintenance, gentle maintenance of memory. Myra began to fade slightly, not disappearing, but blending into the soft gold of the hallway. "Will I see you again?" Ilara asked. "Whenever dusk leans gently into evening," Myra replied, "and whenever you brew quiet courage." Then she was gone. Ilara stood alone before the vast window. She did not step through it. She did not need to. Instead, she placed her palm against the invisible glass. A warmth spread outward, subtle, like sunlight passing through curtains. In the layered town, small things shifted. The woman in the car wiped her eyes and reached for her phone, not to scroll, but to call someone she trusted. The teenager beneath the street lamp looked up at the sky for the first time in hours. The baker paused, inhaling deeply, remembering why he loved the rhythm of dough. No miracles, no fireworks, just micro moments of remembering. Ilara smiled. She stepped backward out of the unfinished door. As the hallway began to dim, the lanterns lowered their glow. She walked calmly back toward the entrance. As she passed each door, she felt their weight balanced, neither too heavy nor too light. When she stepped through the threshold into the linen closet, the wall solidified gently behind her. She stood once again in her familiar hallway, morning light, coffee scent, ordinary life, and yet she felt expanded, not larger, but deeper. Later that day, she helped her mother fold laundry without being asked. She walked to the bakery and thanked the man behind the counter with quiet sincerity. She lingered on the hill behind her house at sunset, not summoning stars, not calling wind, just listening. The house did not open the remembering hallway every day. It did not need to. She now carried its lesson. Weeks passed. Winter edged closer. One evening, as snow began to fall in soft spirals, Alara sat by her bedroom window watching flakes gather on pine branches. The world felt hushed. She placed her hand over her heart. Warmth answered, not dramatic, not glowing visibly, just steady. Downstairs, the house creaked softly. Content. Outside, a passerby paused briefly under a street lamp, watching the snow. For no clear reason, they felt a small lift in their chest, a quiet reassurance they could not explain. Farther away, someone lying awake in their bed turned over and finally drifted into rest. Magic traveled in ways no one charted. Alara lay back beneath her blankets. The wind brushed lightly against her window, not calling this time, simply present. She closed her eyes, and in the space between waking and dreaming, she felt the house breathe, not as wood and nails, but as memory tended. The Book of 11 had ended, but the house that remembered had only just begun. And somewhere, perhaps in your own quiet home, a floorboard may feel slightly warm beneath your feet. A door may seem thinner than before. The hallway may exist just beyond the ordinary, not to frighten you, not to overwhelm you, but to remind you growing older is not the same as growing closed. Magic does not vanish. It waits in walls. It waits in pauses. It waits in the steady warmth you choose to keep alive. Sleep now. The house is holding your stories gently. And somewhere, a wizard girl continues to listen. The snow that fell upward. Winter arrived quietly that year, not in a rush of storms, not in dramatic winds, but in slow, steady hushes. Frost traced delicate patterns along windows. The river wore a thin veil of silver ice near its edges. The pine forest stood tall and patient beneath pale skies. Alara had grown taller too, not dramatically, just enough that her sleeves felt shorter and her footsteps felt more certain. There was a steadiness in her now, a calm awareness that hummed beneath everything she did. She still listened to the wind, but now she also listened to silence. One evening, as the first real snowfall began, she stood at her bedroom window watching flakes drift downward in lazy spirals. Except one flake wasn't drifting down. It was rising. At first she thought it was just a trick of light, a shift in wind. But then another flake lifted from the ground and floated upward, slow and deliberate. Then another, and another. Within moments, a small swirl of snow near the forest edge began to reverse its fall, spiraling gently back toward the sky. Alara did not panic. She wrapped her scarf around her neck and slipped quietly outside. The air felt soft, almost muffled. Snow cushioned her steps as she walked toward the clearing beyond her house. The rising snow formed a quiet column in the center of the trees, Not a storm, not chaotic, just ascending. The wind did not speak this time. It waited. Ilara stepped closer. As she did, the upward falling snowflakes began to shimmer faintly. Within each tiny crystal, she saw flickers of something familiar. Memories, not hers, others. A child releasing a balloon and watching it drift skyward. A grandmother closing the door of a house for the last time. There's a man standing at a train platform, unsure whether to stay or leave. A girl staring at her reflection, wondering who she is becoming. The snow was carrying unspoken moments, moments people had let go of or tried to. But instead of settling into the earth like ordinary snow, these moments were rising, returning somewhere. Ilara. The voice was soft, almost woven into the snowfall itself. She turned. From between the trees emerged a figure she had never seen before, yet somehow recognized. He appeared neither young nor old. His coat shimmered faintly like frost at dawn. His hair was pale as winter light, and his eyes held that quiet, endless depth found only in long horizons. "Who are you?" Ilara asked gently. "I am called Arcton," he replied. "Keeper of departing things." His voice carried no chill, only calm. "Ilara Wren," he continued, inclining his head slightly, "you have been tending memory, and so the departures have begun to stir." She watched the rising snow. "They're not sad," she observed. "No," Arcton said, "they are unfinished." He stepped beside her, watching the upward drift. Every moment a person releases leaves an imprint. Most settle peacefully. But some, the ones wrapped in uncertainty, hover. When someone nearby learns to remember gently, those hovering things feel safe enough to rise. Ilara thought of the remembering hallway in her house, of the older version of herself she had steadied, of the quiet shifts in town. "I didn't mean to cause this," she said softly. "You didn't cause it," Arcton replied. "You created warmth, and warmth allows release." As a snowflake drifted upward between them. Inside it, she saw a young boy standing at the edge of a swimming pool, too afraid to jump, pretending he didn't want to anyway. The image flickered, then dissolved into white. "Where do they go?" she asked. Arcton looked toward the sky. "Into the wide archive." She tilted her head. "The world," he explained gently, "is layered with places most never see. You have walked the hallway of remembering. You have tended rivers of stagnant wishes. The wide archive is where released moments are carried, not to be erased, but to be honored without weight." The column of rising snow widened, but something tugged at Ilara's awareness, a resistance. One snowflake near the base trembled violently, rising, falling, rising again as if unsure. She stepped closer. Inside it, she saw a girl, about her own age, sitting alone in a school cafeteria, pretending to text while no one joined her table. The image pulsed with quiet ache. "That one isn't ready," Ilara murmured. Arcton nodded slowly. "Some moments do not need to depart, they need to be witnessed." Ilara knelt, cupping her hands beneath the trembling flake. It settled into her palms, cold but not biting. She closed her eyes. She did not send light. She did not speak spells, she simply held it. Breathing steadily, acknowledging the feeling inside it, not fixing, not dismissing, not explaining away, just staying. The trembling slowed, the image shifted. The girl in the cafeteria looked up, not because someone joined her, but because she noticed something outside the window, snow beginning to fall. It was a small, private moment of beauty. The snowflake in Alara's hands softened. Then, gently, it rose, upward, steady now. Arcton watched her with quiet approval. "You understand," he said. "Not everything needs to be carried away," Alara replied softly. "No," he agreed. "Some things need to be held before they can rise." The snowfall began to slow. The column thinned. Above them, the sky shimmered faintly, not visibly magical, but somehow wider. Alara felt something shift inside her chest, a stretching. As if her awareness extended beyond the edges of her own small town. "Why me?" she asked, not out of doubt, but curiosity. Arcton considered. "Because you do not grasp at what you see," he said. "You do not try to possess the magic. You listen." The world entrusts its softer mechanisms to those who listen. The final snowflake lifted from the ground. The clearing returned to ordinary snowfall, gentle flakes drifting downward again. Arcton stepped back. "Our paths will cross when departures gather," he said, "but do not seek them. They come on their own." Alara nodded. "Will the town notice?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "They will sleep more peacefully tonight. They may not know why." And then, like breath dissolving into winter air, he was gone. That night, the town did sleep deeply. Dreams came softer. Rest lasted longer. In homes scattered across quiet streets, people shifted beneath blankets and felt, without understanding, that something unspoken had lightened. Alara lay in her own bed watching snow drift beyond her window. She felt no pride, no grand sense of accomplishment, only a gentle humility. The world was layered with quiet systems, remembering, releasing, tending, rising. She was not in charge of them. She was simply invited to participate. As she drifted towards sleep, she sensed something subtle above her house, high beyond the clouds, beyond even stars. A vast expanse like a slow-turning sky filled not with constellations, but with tiny glimmers. Each glimmer a released moment, not forgotten, not erased, stored without burden, the wide archive. She did not see it clearly, but she felt its existence, and she understood something new. Magic was not only about what stays, it was also about what is allowed to leave. Morning came crisp and bright. Sunlight reflected off snowbanks in dazzling sheets. The world looked newly polished. Alara walked into town bundled warmly, boots crunching softly. She passed the bakery. The baker waved. He looked lighter somehow, as if he had slept deeply for the first time in months. She passed the school playground. Children laughed louder than usual, their breath fogging in bright bursts. Nothing dramatic had changed, and yet everything felt subtly balanced. As she reached the small bridge over the river, she paused. The water flowed steadily beneath thin ice, but for just a moment she thought she saw something shimmer within it, not stuck this time. Moving, released, she smiled. Across town, someone sat at a kitchen table writing a letter they had postponed for years. A teenager deleted a message they almost sent in anger. An elderly man opened a photo album without feeling crushed by it. Upward falling snow leaves quiet ripples. That evening, Alara brewed a small cup of tea from the tin labeled Quiet Courage, the one Myra had given her long ago. Steam curled upward in delicate spirals. She held the cup between her palms and watched the movement of vapor. Rising, always rising, not to escape, but to transform. She realized something then. Growing up would bring many departures, friendships shifting, certainties dissolving, seasons ending. But departure was not loss when tended properly. It was motion, and motion was life. Outside, snow continued falling normally, now downward, soft and steady. But somewhere in layers unseen, certain moments were rising gently toward the wide archive. Alara closed her eyes. She did not call wind. She did not summon light. She simply breathed. And in her breathing, the world's quieter mechanisms aligned. The snow that had fallen upward had returned to stillness. The departures had been honored. And somewhere beyond clouds, a new glimmer joined the vast archive, a snowflake-shaped memory of a girl who learned to hold before letting go. Sleep now. If something in your heart feels ready to rise, let it. Not everything must be clutched. Not everything must remain. Some things are meant to drift upward into gentler keeping. The night is wide, and you are held within it. The map that drew itself, spring arrived not with trumpets, but with thaw. Snow receded slowly into the earth. The river loosened its icy edges and began humming again. Pine needles glistened under soft rain, and the air carried that unmistakable scent of beginnings, damp soil, new grass, distant blossoms. Alara felt the shift immediately. Winter had been about release. Spring, she sensed, would be about direction. One afternoon, while reorganizing her small wooden desk by the bedroom window, she discovered something peculiar. Beneath a stack of blank paper, there lay a single sheet she did not remember placing there. It was thick, cream-colored, slightly textured, like parchment from another time. At first glance, it appeared empty, but as she tilted it toward the light, faint lines shimmered into view. Not words, lines, curving, branching, interweaving. A map, but not of roads she recognized. The shapes shifted subtly as she watched, as if drawn in slow motion by an invisible hand. Alara sat down carefully. She did not touch it yet. She simply observed. The lines formed what looked like a forest at the top edge, a river cutting through the center, and small clusters that might represent houses. But there were also strange markings, circles that pulsed faintly, pathways that looped in impossible geometry, and a long arc that extended beyond the page's edge as if continuing somewhere unseen. A single word began to appear near the bottom corner. Thresholds. She exhaled slowly. The map was not of the town. Not exactly. It was of something layered over it. a second version, a quiet architecture of unseen crossings. The page warmed slightly under her gaze. Then, without her touching it, a small dot of golden light appeared near the center. It pulsed once, twice. She understood that was her, or rather, her current location within this layered map. The dot moved slightly as she shifted in her chair. The map responded to her presence. Carefully, she placed her fingertips against the parchment. The lines sharpened instantly. The river on the page glowed faintly blue. The forest deepened into rich green ink, and new pathways emerged, stretching outward from the golden dot like veins of light. She heard no wind, no voice, only the quiet hum she had come to recognize as alignment. "You're not showing me places," she murmured. "You're showing me choices." As if in confirmation, the map rearranged itself again. One path from her golden dot curved gently toward a small circle near the school building. Another extended toward the hill behind her house. The third branched in an unexpected direction, toward the far edge of town where an old train depot stood abandoned. The depot. She hadn't thought about it in years. It sat near rusted tracks long unused, the paint peeling, windows dusty and cracked. And children sometimes dared each other to approach it, though it held no real danger, only stillness. On the map, the depot pulsed faintly, a threshold. Ilara felt curiosity stir. She folded the map carefully and slipped it into her coat pocket. Not because she needed it to travel, but because she sensed it would continue to shift. As she stepped outside, the golden dot moved across the parchment in rhythm with her footsteps. The world looked ordinary in daylight, but now she sensed the overlay everywhere. The sidewalk was not just concrete, it was a crossing of intentions. The bakery door was not just wood and glass, it was a daily threshold between solitude and exchange. Every space held invisible intersections. As she walked toward the old depot, the golden dot glowed slightly brighter. The farther she moved from familiar paths, the more the map adjusted, lines redrawing, angles shifting. When she reached the edge of town, the air felt thicker somehow, not heavy, just aware. The depot stood as she remembered, weathered boards, a sagging roofline, faded lettering barely visible above the entrance. But something about it vibrated subtly now. She removed the map. The golden dot pulsed rapidly. The outline of the depot on the page expanded, revealing hidden chambers within its drawn walls, rooms not visible from the outside. "Another layer," she whispered. The door of the depot creaked as she pushed it open. Dust motes floated lazily in beams of sunlight cutting through cracked windows. The floorboards groaned softly under her weight, nothing dramatic, nothing obviously magical. And yet, as she stepped inside fully, the air shifted. The sound of her breathing echoed slightly differently. She unfolded the map again. The golden dot had moved inward. And the drawn outline of the building deepened, as if revealing a second structure inside the first. A structure made not of wood, but of something luminous and faint. She closed her eyes briefly, listening, Then she walked toward the back wall. On the surface, it was solid planks. On the map, it was a doorway. She pressed her palm against the boards. The warmth responded instantly. The wood did not dissolve this time. It remained, but her perception shifted, and suddenly she could see it. The doorway of pale light overlaying the wall, tall, arched, intricate patterns carved along its frame. She stepped through. Inside was a vast circular chamber unlike the hidden library of before. This space felt more architectural, more intentional. Walls curved upward into a high domed ceiling painted with constellations, but these constellations were unfamiliar, their shapes formed by symbols rather than stars. In the center stood a large table. On it lay dozens of maps, each one different, each one alive with shifting lines. A voice echoed gently from the dome above. "You have entered the Carterium." Ilara turned slowly. Standing near the table was a young man, perhaps 17 or 18, dressed in simple earth-toned clothing. His eyes were sharp, thoughtful, his posture steady. He did not look surprised to see her. "Who are you?" she asked. "Rowan," he replied, "apprentice cartographer." "Cartographer of what?" "Thresholds," he said simply. She stepped closer to the table. Each map showed different landscapes, forests, cities, coastlines, all overlaid with shimmering lines and pulsing points. "You map choices," she realized. Rowan nodded. "Not to control them," he added, "only to understand where they intersect." Ilara looked down at her own parchment, which had grown brighter in her hands. "Why show me this?" "Because you've begun influencing intersections," Rowan said calmly. "When you tend memory, when you hold departures, when you steady warmth, paths adjust." She frowned slightly. "I'm not trying to change anyone's path." "And you're not," he assured her. "But presence alters geometry." The phrase hung in the air. Presence alters geometry. He gestured toward the central table. "Come," she approached. In the center lay a larger map, one she immediately recognized. It was her town, overlaid with countless luminous lines. Some were faint, some bright, some tangled, some smooth. She saw her house glowing softly near the forest's edge. The bakery, the school, the river, all present. But she also saw something new. Knots. Small clusters where lines overlapped tightly, almost painfully. "What are those?" she asked. "Convergence points," Rowan replied. "Moments when multiple choices press together." She studied one knot near the school. "It feels tense," she murmured. "It is," he said. Several students are approaching decisions about belonging, about identity. The lines are crossing densely. She thought of the snowflake she had held the girl alone at the cafeteria table. "Can I untangle them?" Rowan shook his head gently. "No one untangles for another. But someone steady nearby can soften the crossing." She understood, not intervention, presence. The golden dot representing her glowed faintly brighter. Another knot pulsed near the old train tracks, beyond the depot. "What about that one?" Rowan's expression shifted slightly. "That is a dormant threshold." Dormant. Unused, long neglected. It once connected departure and return. Ilara felt curiosity deepen. Departure and return, he nodded. Long ago, when trains ran regularly, the depot was a place of transition. People left, people arrived. The threshold was active. But when the tracks fell silent, the energetic crossing dimmed. She considered that. So it's lonely. Rowan smiled faintly. In a way, she stepped closer to the large map. Can dormant thresholds wake? Yes, he said quietly, but not through force. How then? Through meaning, the chamber hummed gently. Ilara realized something. The upward falling snow had carried departures. The depot had once carried departures physically. Perhaps the dormant threshold was not about trains. Perhaps it was about unfinished transitions. She looked at Rowan. If people don't have a place to mark their departures, they linger. His eyes brightened slightly. Precisely. She turned back toward the luminous outline of the depot on the map. What if it becomes something else? Rowan did not answer directly. Instead, he asked, "What do you see when you stand there?" She closed her eyes briefly. She saw empty benches, dust, silence, but she also saw potential, a gathering place, a shared pause, a space to acknowledge change, a place to say goodbye properly, she whispered. And hello, Rowan added. The map shimmered. The dormant knot near the depot loosened slightly. Not activated yet, but responsive. Rowan stepped back. You are not a cartographer, he said, but you are a walker. A walker. You move through thresholds without tearing them. That is rarer. She felt warmth rise to her cheeks. I don't want to control the map, she said firmly. Good, Rowan replied. Maps dislike being controlled. A faint smile touched his face. The chamber's light softened. You will not always see the cartarium, he continued. But the map you carry will continue to draw itself. She looked down at her parchment. The golden dot pulsed calmly now. New faint lines extended from the depot toward the center of town. Possibility lines. She looked back up. Rowan had stepped farther into the dome's shadow. Will I see you again? She asked. When intersections thicken, he replied. Then the chamber began to dissolve, not abruptly, but like ink fading from water. Ilara stepped backward instinctively. The wooden wall of the depot reappeared behind her. Dust motes returned. Sunlight filtered through cracks. She stood alone in the abandoned building, but she was not unchanged. She unfolded the map one more time. It no longer showed the vast cartarium, just her town. The depot glowed faintly, a possibility awaiting activation. She stepped outside into the afternoon light. The sky stretched wide and clear above her. Children's laughter drifted faintly from town. She understood now. Not every threshold opens into hidden chambers. Some open into community, some into conversation, some into shared acknowledgement of change. As she walked back toward home, the golden dot followed calmly. She did not rush, she did not plan dramatically, but she began to consider small actions, inviting neighbors to clean the depot, hosting gatherings there, creating a place where departures and returns could be honored again, not with trains, but with presence. magic did not always mean glowing doors. Sometimes it meant organizing chairs, hanging lanterns, listening. As dusk settled, she paused on the hill behind her house. The sky turned soft lavender. She removed the parchment once more. The lines had shifted again, subtly. The knot at the school loosened slightly. The dormant threshold at the depot glowed a fraction brighter. Presence alters geometry. She folded the map carefully and held it against her chest, not possessively, gratefully. The wind brushed past her gently, not speaking, not instructing, simply moving. Below, the town carried on, unaware of maps drawing themselves in quiet bedrooms, unaware of cartariums hidden within abandoned depots. And that was as it should be. Magic thrives best when it does not demand applause. As night deepened, stars emerged one by one, each a point of light. Each part of a larger pattern only visible from far above. Ilara lay down later that evening with the map resting on her bedside table. As she drifted towards sleep, she sensed faint lines of light extending outward, not from the parchment, but from her awareness. Not controlling. Not directing. Simply aligning gently with the world's quiet intersections. The map would continue to draw itself. Thresholds would continue to form. Departures would rise. Memories would soften. And she would keep walking. Sleep now. Your own paths are shifting softly too, not forced, not hurried. Just gently redrawing themselves beneath your steady presence. The map is alive, and so are you. The lanterns beneath the water summer arrived slowly, like a long exhale. The air grew warm and honey soft. Fireflies returned to the fields at dusk. The river, freed completely from winter's hold, moved in wide, shimmering ribbons beneath the sun. The old train depot no longer stood abandoned. Not exactly. It had not transformed overnight. There had been no dramatic unveiling, no magical burst of light. Instead, there were brooms and laughter, paint-streaked hands, and neighbors rediscovering one another in quiet cooperation. Ilara had not declared a grand plan. She had simply asked questions. What if we used the space? What if people could gather there? What if departures and returns had somewhere gentle to land? And slowly, people said yes. Now lanterns hung from the depot's rafters. Long wooden benches lined the walls. Someone had brought a piano missing 2 keys, and someone else had fixed the roof enough to keep out rain. They called it the crossing room, not because they knew about thresholds or dormant geometry, but because it felt right. Ilara sat by the river one evening after helping arrange chairs for a small farewell gathering. The family was moving away, and the town had decided to honor their leaving instead of pretending it wasn't happening. The sky glowed gold and lavender. She removed the self-drawing map from her bag. The golden dot representing her pulsed softly near the riverbank. The depot glowed brighter now. The one dormant knot had loosened fully, lines extending outward, flowing rather than tangled. But something new shimmered near the center of the river, a faint circle, submerged. She tilted the parchment toward the light. The river's outline deepened into translucent blue ink. Beneath its surface, faint shapes flickered, small orbs drifting slowly with the current. Lanterns, underwater lanterns. Ilara looked up at the real river. It appeared ordinary, sunlight skipping across ripples, dragonflies darting low, but her awareness sharpened. She stepped closer to the edge and knelt. The water felt warm from the day's heat. She dipped her fingers in. The surface trembled, and for just a moment she saw them. Dozens of small lanterns beneath the water, glowing faintly in soft gold and pale blue. They drifted slowly, not anchored, not rising, simply suspended below the current. She inhaled slowly. "What are you holding?" she whispered to the river. The current did not answer in words, but she felt something familiar. Not stagnant wishes this time, not departures ready to rise. These were promises, promises made quietly, promises postponed, promises forgotten but not broken. Each lantern contained a flicker, an intention someone had once spoken, perhaps softly to themselves. "I'll write that book someday. I'll tell her how I feel. I'll learn to forgive. I'll start again. I'll be brave next time." The lanterns were not heavy like the old snow memories had been. They were patient, waiting. But as she watched, she noticed something troubling. Some lanterns were dimming, not extinguishing entirely, but fading. The river carried them gently, yet none rose to the surface. They were not meant to rise. They were meant to be remembered. "Ilara." The voice came not from behind her, but from beside the current itself. She turned. Standing on a flat stone midstream, though she could not recall him stepping there, was Arcton, keeper of departing things. His frost-toned coat shimmered faintly even in summer light. "You see them," he said quietly. She nodded. "They're not ready to leave." "No," he agreed. They were never meant to depart. They were meant to ignite. She frowned slightly. "Why are they under the water?" "Because promises unacted upon sink," he replied gently. "Not from failure, from neglect." She looked back at the drifting lanterns. "They're fading." "Some are," he said. "But fading is not final." She studied the river more carefully. Some lanterns glowed brighter where sunlight penetrated deeper. Others drifted in shadow. "They need warmth," she murmured. Arcton inclined his head. "Not yours alone." She understood immediately. This was not something she could solve by summoning light or holding stillness. Promises require participation. "Why show me?" she asked. "Because you stand at a confluence," he said. The crossing room reactivated departure and return, but promise is another current. She looked at the far bank where children were skipping stones, at the small group of neighbors chatting near the water's edge. "The town is full of promises," she said softly. "Yes," Arcton replied, "and summer is when many are remembered." She felt something settle into clarity. Lanterns underwater, crossing room above ground, thresholds mapped, departures rising. Now promises waiting, she stood. "If people gather at the river," he smiled faintly. "Presence alters geometry," he reminded her. She nodded, "not to control, to invite." Over the next week, Alara spoke quietly with neighbors. Not about underwater lanterns, not about hidden currents. She simply asked, "What did you once promise yourself?" The answers came slowly at first. Some laughed it off, some shrugged, but others paused, and in the pausing, something stirred. The baker admitted he once wanted to teach children how to bake, not just sell bread. A retired teacher confessed she had always meant to paint the mural she designed years ago. A teenager revealed she had promised herself she would try out for the school play, but never had. None of these were dramatic revelations. They were small human promises. Alara suggested something simple. What if we hold a lantern evening by the river? Not floating lanterns, not spectacle, just gathering, sharing intentions aloud, reigniting them. The idea spread quietly. By the time the evening arrived, the entire riverbank shimmered with subtle anticipation. The sky turned deep indigo as twilight settled. Neighbors brought blankets, lemonade, folding chairs. The crossing room's lanterns had been temporarily relocated, hung along tree branches near the water. Soft golden light reflected on the surface. Alara stood near the edge, heart steady. She did not know exactly what would happen. She only knew presence mattered. The gathering began with simple sharing. One by one, people spoke. Not grand speeches, just sentences. I promised myself I'd start again. I said I would call my brother. I wanted to build something with my hands. I meant to forgive. As each promise was spoken aloud, the river responded, at first subtly, then unmistakably. Beneath the surface, the submerged lanterns brightened. Their glow strengthened. Some began drifting upward, not to leave, but to hover just below the surface where their light could be seen faintly through water. A hush fell over the crowd. They did not see the lanterns directly, but they felt something, a warmth, a soft stirring. The baker stepped forward. "I'll start the Saturday classes," he said quietly, "if anyone wants to come." A few hands rose immediately. The retired teacher smiled nervously. "I could sketch the mural by next week," she said. Applause followed, gentle, encouraging. The teenager swallowed. "I'll audition," she whispered. Her friend squeezed her hand. The river shimmered. Alara knelt at the water's edge. The lanterns beneath the surface no longer dimmed. They glowed steadily now, not blazing, but alive. Arcton stood unseen beyond the tree line, watching with quiet approval. The current shifted slightly, no longer carrying promises aimlessly, but circulating them through warmth. Alara dipped her fingers into the water. The lanterns did not need to be lifted. They did not need rescue. They needed acknowledgement. As the gathering wound down, laughter lingered softly in the air. No fireworks, no spectacle, just renewed intention. When the last of the neighbors drifted home, Alara remained by the river. The underwater lanterns glowed faintly but steadily now. Some had risen closer to the surface. Some remained deeper but brighter. "You didn't ignite them," Arcton's voice said softly behind her. She turned. "No," she agreed. "They ignited themselves." He nodded. "Promise is a current best stirred collectively." She watched the water. Will they stay lit as long as action follows warmth? He replied. She smiled slightly. No pressure, he chuckled quietly, a sound like frost cracking gently at dawn. You continue to learn, he said. Memory, departure, threshold, promise. She looked up at the sky where stars began to pierce the velvet dark. It's all connected, she murmured. Yes, he said. And you are not the center, only a steady point. She appreciated that, to be a steady point, not the hero, not the architect, just aligned. Arced and stepped backward into shadow. Summer will deepen, he said. Currents will shift again. Then he was gone. Later that night, Ilara returned home. The house felt quietly content. She placed the self-drawing map on her desk. The river glowed brighter than before. Small new lines extended outward from it, connecting to houses, to the crossing room, to the school. Promise altering geometry. She lay in bed listening to crickets outside her window. Her heart felt neither heavy nor triumphant, just open. Beneath the flowing river, lanterns drifted in soft gold and blue, no longer fading. In kitchens across town, notebooks were opened. In quiet bedrooms, auditions were practiced in whispers. In garages, dusty tools were lifted again. Nothing flashy, just ignition. The world does not always need grand magic. Sometimes it needs remembering. Sometimes it needs releasing. And sometimes it needs the courage to speak a promise aloud. Ilara closed her eyes. The river hummed steadily. The lanterns beneath the water glowed, and somewhere deep within the layered architecture of unseen maps, another threshold brightened, not from crossing, not from departure, but from beginning. Sleep now. If there is a promise resting quietly inside you, let it warm. It does not need to blaze tonight. It only needs to glow. The current will carry it forward.
There's nothing else you need to listen for now. Just let your breathing stay slow and easy. If you're still awake, that's okay. And if you're drifting off, let yourself go gently. I'll be right here next time. Rest well, and good night.